Governments love to say they work for your financial freedom. They highlight concepts like stability, growth, and opportunity. But if you look closely at history, you come across a much darker and more alarming picture. Governments have used hidden financial tricks to weaken the economic situation of ordinary people while keeping wealth and power in their own hands. And the interesting part is that these tricks are not new. They have been used for the same purpose for centuries, presented under different names, and in different packages, but always serving the same goal: to make the rich richer and keep the majority dependent on them. Let's start with the oldest and easiest trick: inflation. When a government spends more than it can collect through taxes, it has two options. Either it admits the truth and collects direct taxes from citizens, which is politically dangerous, or it secretly devalues the currency. This lowers the value of coins and banknotes circulating in the market. Ancient Rome used this method perfectly. In the 3rd century AD, emperors who had to pay for military expenses reduced the silver content of the denarius. A coin that was once made of almost pure silver eventually became worthless copper with only a thin silver coating. Citizens paid the price because the empire acted as if nothing had changed. Inflation rose, savings collapsed, wages lagged behind. This was literally a silent tax on the people, and a similar tactic is used today through central banks. In the Middle Ages, another version appeared: forced loans. In England, France, and Spain, kings constantly borrowed from wealthy merchants and guilds. Of course, this was not a voluntary act. Refusing to lend meant penalties, confiscation of property, or worse and more devastating consequences. Sometimes kings promised to repay with interest, but the payment usually came late, in a devalued currency, or not at all. While governments financed their wars and palaces this way, merchants had no choice but to give up their capital. The key point of this trick was disguising the coercion as patriotism or duty. And it worked for years. Fast forward to more recent times, the financial system itself became a trick. When the Bank of England opened in 1694, it wasn't out of charity. The government needed financing to wage war against France. Wealthy investors bought government bonds, and in return, the crown guaranteed interest payments through taxes. Sounds like a fair deal, doesn't it? But who paid those taxes? Ordinary people like us. Through taxes on goods like salt, beer, and cloth, the rich lent money to the state and earned safe interest, while the poor carried a heavier tax burden to pay those interests. This was a wealth transfer system disguised as national finance. And it reinforced a pattern that still continues today. The safest investment is lending to governments. And these returns are ultimately guaranteed by the labor and consumption of the public. Looking at today's world, the trick is everywhere. Take deficit spending. Governments issue huge debts which investors, banks, and foreign powers purchase. Politicians tell the public that this is for infrastructure, jobs, or social programs. But most of it is spent on defense contractors, corporate subsidies, and bailout packages. When it's time to repay, governments don't cut spending at the top. They raise taxes, devalue the currency, or cut social benefits. The trick is this: the debt is portrayed as being for the people, but the entire burden falls on the people, while the gains go to bondholders. Bailouts are another example. During the 2008 financial crisis, banks took reckless risks, securitized toxic mortgages, and nearly collapsed the global economy. Who paid? Ordinary citizens, through massive subsidies. Who profited? The same banks emerging even bigger and more powerful. The trick was simple: privatize gains, socialize losses, and the public was convinced this was necessary to save the system. Pension and social security systems are also a kind of magic trick. For decades in the US, UK, and Europe, citizens have given their money to the government waiting for retirement, but governments don't actually save this money. They spend it immediately and leave behind an IOU. Future taxpayers will pay off that debt. Essentially, it resembles an intergenerational Ponzi scheme wrapped in official language. The system works until demographic shift and populations age. Then the government innovates by reducing payments, raising retirement ages, or devaluing the currency. What all these have in common is perception. Inflation is sold as growth, forced loans as duty, national debt as investment, bailouts as stability, pension cuts as reform. The truth is hidden. Wealth is transferred from the many to the few, from the bottom to the top. History shows this trick works for centuries because most people don't know economic history, don't understand the financial system, and by the time they notice the trap, it's already over. Recently, the tricks have become even more sophisticated. After the 2008 crisis, quantitative easing, which most people had never heard of, became an example. Central banks created trillions of dollars to stabilize markets, buying government bonds and mortgage-backed securities. Politicians and bankers told the public this was necessary, and as always it worked, for the financial system. Asset prices soared, stocks, real estate, and bonds gained value. But who owns most of these assets? The rich. The benefit for the average person is limited, but the costs rise, distorted markets and higher living expenses. Another modern trick is hidden taxes. Instead of directly raising income taxes, governments quietly tax through sales taxes, fuel taxes, and especially inflation. If prices rise faster than wages, it is a hidden tax on savings and purchasing power. Governments love inflation because it reduces the real value of their own debt. For citizens, it restricts financial freedom. Even if your salary rises nominally, if living costs rise faster, you are losing wealth. This is not a system flaw, it is the system itself. Don't forget that regulations are also a trick. On the surface, they exist to protect the public, financial rules, safety standards, consumer rights, but history shows that powerful industries shape those who regulate them. Railroads in the 19th century, oil companies in the 20th century, and now tech and finance, all have crafted rules for themselves. The public sees protection, insiders see profit. War financing continues an old trick in new clothing. In World War I and II, governments issued massive bonds and pushed citizens to buy them as a patriotic duty. People thought they were supporting their country. Which was true, but these bonds were also high-yield, low-risk investments for the wealthy, guaranteed by future taxes. In the 21st century, the same system continues. The Iraq and Afghanistan wars were financed with trillions of dollars. Profits went to defense companies, banks, and bondholders, and ordinary taxpayers carried the bill. Complexity itself is a tool. Thousands of pages of tax codes, financial instruments that even professionals struggle to understand, hidden budget items. All make it impossible for the public to track where money goes. Complexity becomes camouflage. In ancient Rome, debased coins were a signal. Today there are hidden balance sheets, jargon, and obscure programs, but the trick is similar. If the public can't track it, the wealth transfer happens unnoticed. So why does this matter now? Because the tricks still exist and worse, are accelerating. Inflation erodes your savings. Debt burdens grow every year. Bailouts have become almost a reflex when markets shake. Central banks continue manipulating the money supply. Governments shift costs onto the public. The result: the system strengthens financial elites while you earn less real wealth. History shows these tricks always continue. When Rome debased its coins, citizens suffered. When kings took forced loans, merchants lost. When modern states play with inflation and debt, households bear the burden. Different eras, same system. And the sad truth: most people never escape these tricks because they're not even aware of them. They accept inflation as natural, taxes as inevitable, bailouts as a helping hand. They trust the government. Their knowledge of economic history is near zero, and this ignorance is the most powerful trick. When the past is forgotten, no one notices the repetition. That's why governments prefer citizens to lack financial education. Financial education is power. Economic history is a weapon. If you know the tricks, it becomes harder to manipulate you. So what should you do? First, don't fall for the headlines. When the government announces a stimulus, ask who profits first. When inflation rises, understand it's not just an unfortunate event, it's policy. When regulations appear, think about who wrote them and who benefits. Second, build real wealth. Own assets that retain value even when money depreciates. Third, never assume the system works for you just because they say so. Systems exist to protect themselves, not you. History doesn't repeat, but if you don't understand it, it can crush you. The tricks that impoverish the people of Rome are emptying your bank account today. They're just presented in modern language. The only difference is whether you notice them in time.